Did you ever have to pretend everything was fine when it really wasn't?
Christmas used to mean juggling logistics no one else wanted to touch and pretending that the jokes about me being intense were just jokes. But this year, my sister Grace sent a one-line message that said I was too emotionally draining to be around, and for once, there was no emoji, no softener, no follow-up, just that neat little sentence that landed like a door closing on my face, and I sat there reading it until the words stopped vibrating and turned into something solid enough to hold. You would think I shouted or fired back, but I did not, because after a lifetime of being the family shock absorber, you learn that silence is sometimes louder than a speech. So I typed a simple thanks for letting me know and left it at that. And while the group chat rolled on without me, planning menu items and travel times and gift exchanges, I saw the pattern that had been there for years, but politely blurred by me doing what I always do, which is picking up the pieces and pretending it is fine. Grace has always been the star pupil in our parents' eyes, the one whose mistakes are framed as brave experiments and whose wins are amplified by the entire house, and I have always been the one who gets told to be flexible, to understand, to give her time to get on her feet, which is how I ended up making her a part-time administrative assistant at my small company so she could qualify for our group health plan, how I covered her portion when she fell behind, and how I set up a college savings plan in my own name for her kids because I believed that family steps in without needing applause. I did these things quietly, and I never once held them over her head, which makes that little sentence about me being emotionally draining both funny and clarifying. When I showed the text to Mom, she sighed in that careful way she uses when she wants me to do the right thing for the family name, and she said maybe it would be best if I sat this one out to keep the peace since my sister was under a lot of stress. And she said it like I was a puzzle piece that had to be trimmed down to fit the picture, not a person who had carried more than my share for a very long time, and in that moment I realized I was done auditioning for a role I already played for free. I made tea I did not drink, opened my laptop, and signed into the benefits portal I manage as the plan administrator, and the screen asked me to confirm the status of every covered employee, which felt like a question I should have asked myself a long time ago, so I clicked on Grace's name, reviewed the notes that showed I had moved mountains to keep her covered through job changes and cancellations and forgotten forms, and then I started the termination of employment process effective the first day of January, which automatically triggers a loss of active coverage and a continuation offer she can take at full cost if she wants, and the calm that came over me was not vengeance, it was clarity. Because this was not spite. This was me no longer subsidizing a person who just told me my presence was a burden. While I waited for the system to process, I thought about the college accounts I had opened and funded, the automatic transfers I had set on the same day each month, because it made her feel secure to see those balances grow. And I realized I had been giving my sister the stability I never got from this family, so I logged into the savings platform and paused future contributions with a note to myself to reassign the beneficiaries later. A move that did not take a single drop of blood but somehow felt like surgery, clean and necessary and overdue. And if that sounds harsh, then maybe ask why the nice one in the family is always the one who has to swallow insults in the name of grace. My phone buzzed with a message from Grace that was not about me, just a quick ask about whether I could send the new insurance cards, because the old ones somehow got lost, and there was something almost perfect about the timing. Like the universe wanted me to acknowledge that she only remembers me when there is a form to sign or a fire to put out, and I looked at the draft termination form on my screen. Read it one more time to make sure the compliance boxes were checked and the dates aligned with the policy terms, and I took a breath that was longer than it needed to be because I wanted to feel the weight of the choice. Then I pressed submit and watched the green confirmation banner slide across the top of the page. I did not announce it, I did not gloat, and I did not warn her, because warnings are for people who have earned your softness. And in my family, softness gets treated like an infinite resource that miraculously refills itself, no matter how hard people pump the handle. So I closed the laptop, put my phone face down, and let the notifications stack up in the background while I thought about a simple truth I had refused to accept for years, which is that the only way to stop being the family's emotional generator is to unplug yourself and let the lights flicker. When Mom called that night with a gentle suggestion that I apologize for taking the text the wrong way and show up with a smile because it would mean so much to everyone, I listened without interrupting, and when she finished I told her I had heard her. Then I said I would not be coming, and I kept my tone even, because this was not a tantrum, it was a boundary, and I could hear the confusion rising in her voice as she asked if something had happened, and I said that something had finally stopped happening, which might be the same thing. Then I ended the call, blocked the family thread for the weekend, and set my alarm early, because in the morning the benefits administrator will send Grace a notice that will land like an ice bath, and that is fine. Because if I am too emotionally draining to sit at a table, I am also too emotionally generous to keep paying for the feast. The email from the benefits platform went out first thing in the morning and, as predicted, the ping from Grace arrived a few minutes later with her usual blend of panic and entitlement. A string of questions about why the card was not working at the urgent care and how quickly I could fix it because she had plans today and the kids had a checkup next week. And buried inside the demands there was not a single acknowledgement of the message she sent calling me emotionally draining, not one word about Christmas or the way she decided I did not belong, just an assumption that I would, as always, sweep glass off the floor while everyone else kept walking. I answered once and only once, which felt like learning a new language after years of speaking the old one, and I wrote that her employment with my company ended months ago, that the plan requires active status for eligibility, that she would receive continuation paperwork and could elect coverage at full cost if she wanted, and I kept my tone plain to the point of boring on purpose, because I was not going to give anyone an explosion to point at later. Then I put the phone face down and watched it dance across the table as Mom tried calling, then Dad, then Grace again, the three of them a metronome of family urgency that only seems to materialize when I stop doing free labor. Mom finally left a voicemail that started with a sigh and moved into the gentle lecture I know by heart, the one about family and forgiveness, and how the holidays are not the time for big decisions. And she added that Grace was very embarrassed and that I should consider the children, and the word consider sat in my chest like a coin I kept feeding into a machine that never vendored anything back, and I realized I did consider the children. Which is why I had quietly paid premiums and set up tuition plans and babysat emergencies while their mother auditioned for attention, and that is also why I was done. I logged into our company dashboard and finished everything I should have done months earlier when Grace stopped showing up on the days she promised to help, removing her access to the shared inbox that I had set up to make her life easier, closing the dummy tasks I used to shield her from embarrassment, and documenting the offboarding steps in a neat little folder, because if there is one lesson the last few years have taught me, it is that boundaries are cleaner when they come with receipts. And all of this felt less like revenge and more like returning items I had loaned out past their due date. Grace texted again with a new angle, accusing me of humiliating her during a hard season and saying I should have warned her, and for a brief second I almost typed out a summary of the warnings that have been my entire adult life, but I stopped. Because the point was not to litigate history. The point was to stop paying for a future where my generosity gets treated like a public utility, so I left her message on read and opened the education portal for the tuition plan I had set up in my name. And the site greeted me with those cheerful marketing phrases about investing in their dreams, which felt a little perverse considering how many nights I had transferred money after skipping the things I wanted because being the dependable one is an expensive habit. I checked the terms again to be sure, confirmed that as the owner I controlled contributions and beneficiary changes, and I saw the paused transfers I put in place the night before like little breath marks on a long sentence. Then I drafted a short message to the school's bursar explaining that I would no longer be responsible for the monthly plan and asking that the account be moved to the custodial parent for direct billing. A note so straightforward it almost stung. Because the only thing holding this together for years was me quietly choosing to be the safety net while they practiced tightrope walking for applause, and I hit send before I could second-guess the impulse to be kind one more time. The phone rang again, and this time I answered, because I wanted there to be a record of me being clear, and Mom launched right in with a practiced calm. telling me we could talk about feelings after the holidays, but that medical coverage and school accounts were not the place to make statements. And I told her I was not making a statement. I was handing back responsibility to the people who claimed to be adults. And when she said I was hurting the children, I reminded her, without raising my voice, that every dollar in those accounts came from me, that every late fee I ate came from me, and that every time Grace forgot a deadline, I was the one on the phone making sure there was no interruption. And that if I am so exhausting to be around, then I am certainly too exhausting to sponsor. After the call, I blocked the family thread again because I do not need a chorus to sing backup while I try to think. Then I set an automatic reply on my personal email that said I would be away from family correspondence until after the new year, which felt ridiculous and necessary at the same time, and I finished the last practical step by canceling the autopay on the tuition plan and confirming that future invoices would go to Grace instead of me, a small click that changed the direction of a river, and I let myself imagine the moment she opens the school's notice and realizes the money she counted as guaranteed was a choice I made every month, a choice she burned down with a single sentence. I closed the laptop and let the quiet settle, not the old quiet of swallowing anger, but the new quiet of safety. And even though the day was not dramatic in the way my family likes to accuse me of being, it was decisive in a way that made my hands stop shaking, because I had taken back something I forgot belonged to me. And before I went to make dinner, I glanced at the calendar and smiled at the thought that on the first business day the bursar will call the number on file to confirm the change. And for the first time in a very long time, it will not be me, which is not a threat or a tease. It is simply the sound of the other shoe finally landing. The first sign that the ripple had turned into a current came not from Grace, but from the school bursar, who forwarded my note to the custodial parent address, and, within an hour, I started receiving messages that swung from shocked politeness to hot accusation, with Grace insisting that I was sabotaging her life during a hard season and demanding that I reconsider because she had already told the kids what their spring activities would look like, and for a second I almost apologized out of habit, that old reflex that kept me volunteering to be the family firefighter, but I caught myself and reminded the part of me that still craves approval that this was not cruelty, this was arithmetic. Because every month for years I put money where their gratitude should have been, and, with one sentence, she told me exactly how much my contribution was worth to her. What I did next was not dramatic in the cinematic sense my family accuses me of chasing. It was administrative housecleaning with a backbone, which is its own kind of fireworks when you have spent a lifetime pretending that chaos is love. So I pulled the folder where I keep account information for anything I manage that touches Grace's household, and I started working down the list, removing her as an authorized user on the credit card I added her to when she was between jobs because gas was expensive and the kids needed rides to after-school programs, turning off the family phone line that I had kept on my plan because it was cheaper that way and because she always promised to pay me back in a few months that never arrived, and sending a short notice to my auto insurance agent to remove her as an occasional driver on the policy for the minivan I financed under my name years ago to help her qualify for a lower rate since her record was spotty. A decision that made sense when I believed we were on the same team and made no sense at all once she decided my existence was a problem to be managed. The messages intensified as the day stretched on, with Mom adopting that mediation tone she uses when she believes two people are equally wrong even when only one of them did the hitting, and she suggested a temporary truce until after the holidays, by which she meant I should quietly turn everything back on and swallow the insult because family gatherings are delicate and outsiders might notice tension, and I told her I would not be participating in the illusion anymore, that I would not hide the cost on my card so her friends could post about what a perfect family we are, that if Grace wanted to be treated like an adult, she could take the responsibilities that come with adult words. And when Mom whispered that I was making this bigger than it needed to be, I asked her to imagine, just once, that I had sent a message calling Grace too emotionally draining and then asked her to cover my bills the next morning. And we both let that picture sit there until she changed the subject. Because I know how quickly a family like mine can flip the story, I pulled together a simple log of every support item I had been carrying, not to wave around online or shove in anyone's face, but to keep the truth anchored to something sturdier than memory. And as I scanned through the years, I found a handful of small, but telling liberties that Grace had taken more than once. Things like emailing the pediatrician from the company address I gave her when she helped me part-time and signing with a title she does not hold to push appointments forward, or using my business discount at a partner clinic without asking, and I made 2 calls that were not angry or theatrical. One to the clinic to remove any corporate codes from her file because our agreement requires active employment for that courtesy. And one to the school's parent association to correct a record that shows my company as an event sponsor when in reality it was me personally covering a shortfall, which they had logged under my business name because Grace told them it would look better on the flyers, and I asked them to update it to my personal name, which is a tiny thing unless you have ever spent years watching your effort be absorbed into someone else's narrative. Grace tried a legal tone next, forwarding a template-sounding threat about wrongful termination and benefits interference, and instead of panicking like the old me would have, I replied with a tidy packet of the offboarding forms she had signed when she stopped working regular hours, with the time-stamped reminders that she was no longer an active employee, with the plan summary that states eligibility rules in boring language no one reads until it matters, and I finished the message with a polite note that all future correspondence should be in writing, which is the kind of sentence she hates because it means I am not going to be baited into emotional sparring where she can twist the playback, and within minutes the legal angle softened into guilt. Then nostalgia, then a photo of the kids holding up ornaments they made, a photo designed to remind me that I always cave when their faces get involved, and I looked at those small hands and felt both love and clarity, because loving children does not mean allowing their mother to treat you like an ATM with ears. By evening, the group chat I had muted for peace became a parade of relatives volunteering their takes on my character, with an aunt calling me stubborn and a cousin asking why I did not just let this go for the sake of the season. And I realized the audience had arrived for a show I never agreed to headline, so I wrote one careful message to the entire family and said that effective immediately I would not be financing any part of Grace's household that I would not be responding to triangulated messages or public shaming, that if someone wanted to talk to me they could do it directly and respectfully, and then I set the chat to archive on arrival so I would not be tempted to read the commentary. Because nothing drains you faster than running PR on your own life for people who never bought a ticket. Before I went to bed, I made one more move I had been postponing for years out of loyalty, and I logged into the website I built for Grace's side business back when she had energy for ideas, but not for execution. The site I paid to host and kept updated so she could accept bookings she often canceled, and I drafted a simple notice that the site would be on pause until the owner took over billing and administration, with a clean transfer link ready if she wanted the keys, which I will hand over the moment a valid card is attached, and I stared at the blank field where my card information used to live and felt that odd mix of grief and relief that shows up whenever you finish a long overdue chore. Then I clicked save and shut the laptop. While across town, Grace started dialing from a different number because I had muted the first, and I let it ring because tomorrow morning she will learn that the phone line she forgot she used to schedule clients no longer exists on my plan, and that is not cruelty, it is the sound of a budget balancing itself, which, as it turns out, is the most exhausting noise of all when you have built your life on other people keeping things free. They wanted to sit down to clear the air, which in my family translates to a meeting where I absorb blame so everyone can feel better by dessert, and I agreed only on my terms, which meant no raised voices, no side texting under the table, and everything that mattered in writing afterward, so no one could reinvent the conversation the minute we walked out. Because if there is one thing I have learned, it is that people who call you emotionally draining usually mean emotionally inconvenient when you stop solving their mess for free. Mom opened with the soft tone she saves for funeral homes and bank managers, saying that feelings got hurt and misunderstandings happened, and that the holidays were not the right time for hard lines, and I let her finish without jumping in. Then I said that removing Grace from a plan she was not eligible for was not a punishment, but a compliance requirement, that shifting tuition billing to the actual parent was not malicious, but responsible, and that turning off phone lines and credit access I was personally paying for was not revenge, but a boundary that was long overdue, and I watched Dad study the table like the answer might be written in the wood while Mom tried to thread a needle that would let her call me kind without asking Grace to be accountable. Grace arrived late, which she does when she wants a dramatic entrance, and she started with tears that moved quickly into anger, saying I had humiliated her in front of her kids' school and made her look unstable at the clinic when the card failed. And I kept my voice even as I explained that stability is not a look but a ledger, that for years I had been patching holes so she could pretend the roof was sound, that I did not cancel anything she had paid for because she had not paid for it, and that if she wanted to talk about humiliation we could discuss the message where she declared I was too exhausting for Christmas, while asking for the updated insurance cards in the same breath, which is a talent if you think about it. She tried the legal bark again, waving around an online printout about coverage rights and wrongful termination, and I placed a neat folder on the table with the signed-off boarding forms, eligibility rules highlighted in plain, boring lines, reminders with dates and times, and a note from the plan broker confirming that active employment is not a suggestion, but a prerequisite. And when she said she never understood those documents, I told her that claiming you did not read the terms only works when the person you are arguing with did not write them, which I did, and the look she gave me would have set fire to paper if glares came with heat. Mom attempted a compromise that sounded like peace, but smelled like capitulation, proposing that I reinstate coverage through the new year while Grace looked for options, that I restart tuition contributions for a semester to avoid embarrassment, that we make a family pact to be kinder in our language, and I answered in full sentences because I did not want anyone walking away claiming they did not catch my meaning, telling them that kindness without boundaries becomes a subsidy for bad behavior, that my budget is not a community chest, and that when someone tells you you are too much you should believe them and act accordingly, which in my case meant I would no longer be underwriting a household that could not treat me with basic respect. Grace reached for the trump card she always uses when cornered, which is the kids, asking how I could look them in the eye after doing this. And I said that I could do it very easily because I have been the one paying for their checkups and their lessons and their school projects while being treated like a vending machine that sometimes talks. And that my relationship with them did not require me to continue a financial arrangement their mother burned down with a single sentence, and I added, because I wanted no ambiguity, that I was not closing doors for the children, I was closing a pipeline that ran through me, and if she wanted those doors open she could knock on them herself and bring a wallet. When Dad finally spoke he asked if there was any scenario where I would consider turning things back on for a while, and I told him there was exactly one, which was a real apology from Grace that did not include excuses. A written repayment schedule for the debt she had run up on my accounts, a transfer of the website and business number to her name with her card attached, and an agreement that all future requests would be in writing without triangulating through Mom. And I let the silence sit long enough for everyone to understand that I was not bluffing and that I was absolutely prepared to walk away if the answer was no. Grace laughed that small, sharp laugh she uses when she thinks she has found a loophole, and she said I could not take the van because it was a family car. And I looked at her and said the registration has my name on the title and the payment draft has always pulled from my account, that I allowed her to use it when she was between cars because I chose to be generous, and that the spare key was in my bag along with a notice to the lender updating the garaging address back to my building, which would trigger a flag if the vehicle was not returned by the date on the letter, and I added that a tow was scheduled for the afternoon if voluntary return did not occur. Not because I wanted a scene, but because I was finished underwriting the illusion that things were shared when in fact they were borrowed. The meeting ended not with hugs, but with logistics, which suited me fine, and I sent the recap email from the parking lot while they were still arguing about tone and history and who started what. And I drove straight to the lender's branch where I signed the last paper and picked up the little device that would disable the remote start if Grace decided to play games. And on my way home I called the number on file for the business site and heard the automated message I had written that morning, telling clients the owner would be in touch once billing was updated, which meant no one could pretend the change was a surprise. By evening, the texts turned into voicemails. The voicemails turned into long emails with subject lines about family and forgiveness and the meaning of the season, and I set them all to a folder that forwards copies to a private address, so I have a record. Then I took a long breath that had nothing to do with posturing and everything to do with relief, because I had walked into the room they built for my shame and refused to sit in the chair they set out for me, and as I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, the screen lit up with Mom's name and a message that started with please and ended with urgent, and I did not open it, not because I do not care, but because in the morning the tow company will be at Grace's curb, and I want to hear the engine turn over in my driveway for the first time in years before I decide what I am going to say. The tow arrived just after breakfast, and, while the driver backed into the space and waited for a signature, I felt that odd blend of relief and steadiness that shows up when the last piece of a plan clicks into place without noise, and I handed over the spare key, watched the minivan roll onto the flatbed, and followed it home in my car so there would be no opportunity for a last-minute scene on the curb, which meant that by mid-morning the vehicle title, the lender record, and the physical keys had finally returned to the same address for the first time in years, and I could say, without drama, that the things I pay for now live where I live. Mom's call came before the driver cut the straps, her voice hoarse in that practiced way that signals urgency and virtue at the same time, and she said that Grace had been up all night, that the kids were asking questions, that neighbors had seen the truck and were texting, and that the holidays are not the time for this kind of escalation, which would have landed differently if she had not ignored the first escalation when Grace reduced me to a problem statement in a single neat message, so I let her talk until she ran out of phrases. Then I told her I was not punishing anyone, I was simply handing back responsibilities that were mislabeled as mine, and if she wanted to discuss feelings we could do it with a therapist after the new year. In writing first, with agreements we could both sign, and I said it that way on purpose, because I am done with conversations that evaporate the second someone decides the truth is inconvenient. Inside the van I found the familiar stack of school flyers, the medical appointment reminder shoved in the cup holder, and a crumpled thank you card that the kids must have meant to give me months ago. And the handwriting punched straight through my defenses, because despite everything I love those children the way you love people who did not ask to be born into a family that uses generosity like a plug for every leak. And I sat in the driver's seat and read that card twice, then I did the thing that changed the emotional weather for me, which was to call the school's bursar and ask whether a third party could set up a narrow voucher that pays the institution directly without passing through a parent's hands, one term at a time. Contingent on attendance and nothing else, no after-school extras, no cash, no credit, just tuition posted quietly to the ledger so the kids do not get caught in the crossfire of adult pride, and when the bursar said yes, provided the donor remained the pair of record and the funds never touched a personal account, I wired in an amount that covers the spring term and asked her to list the source as an anonymous bridge grant that activates only if the primary account holder is in default, because I wanted the safety net without the chain around my neck. Then I opened the education platform I had paused and moved the remaining balance into a new account with the children as future beneficiaries and me as the sole owner, with disbursements restricted to direct institutional payments when they are of age or when a verified bill arrives from a registrar, which means Grace cannot touch a dollar, cannot lean on the illusion that she controls the spigot, cannot threaten access to affection for access to funds, and I saved the confirmations to a folder labeled proof, not because I want to wave it around like a trophy, but because in my family truth survives best when you pin it to paper. With the paperwork handled, I sent the final message I had drafted and redrafted through the night, a single email to Grace with Mom copied that said I will not be restoring insurance coverage or household subsidies, that the website transfer will be completed the day a valid card is attached, that the phone line and credit access remain closed and will not be reopened, that any future request must be written, specific, and respectful, that harassment will be archived with timestamps, and that contact will be paused for a season so everyone can adjust to the reality that I am not available as an emergency exit. I added one paragraph for the children that Mom could read to them if she chose. which explained in simple language that school would be fine because grown-ups sometimes make arrangements behind the scenes and that they could still send me their report cards if they wanted, not because they owed me proof, but because I like watching people I love do well. Grace replied within minutes with a scattershot of accusations and nostalgia and bait, every line daring me to come back into the ring and swing until we were both embarrassed, and I did not answer. Not because I am cold, but because I finally understand that some fights are just invitations to return to a role I no longer play, so I blocked her number, archived the thread, and set a filter that files family correspondence into a folder I will not open until next month, when the boundary I announced can survive its first test without me hovering over it like a lifeguard who never sits down. By late afternoon, Mom tried again, this time with a message that started with the plea I knew would come, saying she was begging me to talk, that she could not stand the silence, that she would do anything to fix this. And there was a part of me that wanted to step in as usual, to smooth things without asking for change, to accept being useful as a substitute for being respected, but I looked at the van in my driveway, at the confirmation emails lined up in my inbox like little flags on a beach I used to think belonged to someone else, and I breathed through the urge. Then I wrote her back with 2 sentences that were the most generous and the most unyielding I have ever managed, telling her that I love her and that I will talk after the new year with a mediator present and a written agenda, and that until then she should direct all practical questions to the appropriate offices because for once the system, not me, will absorb the panic. When the sun went down, I started the van, not to drive anywhere but to hear the engine that I paid for respond to me and only me, and I let the sound fill the garage while my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter with messages I did not read. And in that small domestic noise I felt the ending I had promised myself on the day the word draining slid across my screen, a clean shift from being the family's generator to being my own power source, a final move that does not slam a door so much as it locks it and hangs the key where I can see it, because if there is ever a conversation worth having again, it will happen on ground I own, in a room I choose, with rules that live on paper and are enforced by me, which is not vengeance and not cruelty and not a performance, it is simply victory, and it is finally mine.